There have been several discussions that have been going on of the murky relationship between air quality and public health. The trouble is that that relationship got murkier with the coronavirus, and how that virus literally revealed to all of us that the public health and quality of life are at further stake. And while that remains important, when it comes to air pollution, just the findings of what PM is made up of, how toxic PM is, where the sources are, and where the pollution into cities and states is coming from, it's all a very complicated science, which incidentally we had not known, despite considering that we had known so much about air quality, even for a place like Delhi, which had been infamous for air pollution and topping the charts across the world for the last 4 or 5 years. That's exactly the focus of the webinar today. The next 90 minutes we want to spend on understanding what's the science of air pollution and how seamless and granular science can actually lend itself to better policy making. And of course, round it up with the discussion on why we all do this. It's a small virus that has put the world into a tizzy, and we don't even realize what the impacts of consistently living in bad air quality for decades together has on what we breathe, but also how we think and how we act. Anyway, we will discuss this as we go along. Let me at this point introduce our panelists to you. We have amongst us our first speaker, Professor S.N. Tripathi. Professor is the head of Department of Civil Engineering at IIT Kanpur and has led some of the stellar work in cutting edge science on air pollution in the country. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. As you all also know, Professor Tripathi is an expert member in the National Clean Air Program of the Ministry, which happens to be the only instrument that is available to us for air quality management in the country. So that makes it even more crucial. We will have Professor Tripathi talk to us about some of the latest studies that he and IIT Kanpur have led, which explain all the aspects of Delhi's air pollution. Our second speaker is Dr. Modi Khare. Hello, sir. Dr. Modi Khare joins us from Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, which has been involved in some of the more progressive and innovative activities when it comes to pollution control. We would like you, sir, to talk about, the importance of real-time seamless data in how policy making can benefit from this, and whether you think how the phase of lockdown revealed that air quality can drop to such a level, then what is the long-term view on managing air quality in key cities and states across the country? And feel free to talk about your experience at MSPCB. We then have Shloka Nath. Shloka, thanks for joining very much. Shloka is the Executive Director of India Climate Collaborative and also the Executive Director of Tata Trusts. And Shloka, we would like you to talk about, from your experience as you've been involved in this work from the last couple of years, to talk about how do you feel monitoring is important in terms of knowing what the problem is, and if you have felt there are gaps and challenges that exist over there. But also it will be good to hear your view on how the business community can flow in more resources and corporate engagement can strengthen air quality management work in the country and accelerate it. We will round this up with the talk by Dr. Arvind Kumar, who is the founder member of the Lung Care Foundation. And Dr. Kumar needs no introduction. His commitment and passion we all see. But sir, may I request you to talk a little bit from your perspective on the front lines and how you want to link it to better to deal with air quality at source and mitigate the causes, rather than dealing with it retrospectively through a disease pandemic, the likes of which we are seeing anyway. The panelists will each have about 7 to 10 minutes to talk. And may I do some partiality at the outset only, and because Professor Tripathi has some new science and research to share with us. We will allow you, sir, a little more time if that is what is needed, but not more than 15. Having said that, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. This call is recorded and we will share the link soon after. Speakers and whatever they will say is on record. So those filing new stories are free to pick up statements, but please better check with the experts once on how you are quoting them. Questions and comments, we would encourage you to please put in chat. We will pick them up from there. If you like to raise your hand, then you can go in the chat box also in the participant list and raise your hand there and we will pick it up. Questions from media will be given preference. If they're not there and if we don't have a lot of those, then we will flow with the general flow. And may I request you to please mute yourself when you're not talking. I will pause now and hand it over to you, Professor Tripathi.
Thank you, Aarti. Thank you very much for organizing this. And I thank all my co-panelists that they take out from their busy schedule to contribute some very important part to this discussion. So I am going to share my slides now. So I believe I am fully audible and my slides can be seen by everyone, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do in next 15 minutes, basically walk you through some of the latest results we have got working with several collaborators and mostly from PSI Switzerland, IIT Delhi, Physical Research Laboratory Ahmedabad, IITM Pune, University of Illinois, and Mano Rachna International University. So these are results from a 2018 experiment, which we conducted at a couple of sites at Delhi. And these studies were mostly supported by Department of Biotechnology and Central Pollution Control Board. So many findings are still in pipeline, but mostly I'm going to talk about 5 papers which came in a row last month. They all got published after peer review in very top-notch journals. So just to give you that idea about the experiment. So basically what you see on the right corner top, 3 sites were chosen for Delhi. That's one in central Delhi, another IIT Delhi, and one other is downwind of Delhi, that is Mano Rachna. And the key difference here was basically we used first time a hybrid approach where we deployed a couple of instruments which give you online chemical speciation. So basically minute-wise data on PM2.5 could be collected, which gives you basically everything what the particulate matter is composed of, starting with ions, metals, and black carbon. And I will show you that why such kind of data can give you unprecedented time frequency information or very high resolved in time information about sources. And also you can have a much granular information than what we had before. At the same time, we also collected particulate matter on filter, which is a traditional approach. But as we know that you have to bring them in the lab and analyze, that takes a little longer time. So therefore, most of the results here are based on online measurements. And that's why we could get very different kind of results, much focused information about sources, their locations, etc. So we will just move on. I will show you the first result. So this is what was just published last month, which is, to my knowledge, a first comprehensive source apportionment of organic aerosols. So what we have heard earlier from the couple of reports that dealt with source apportionment over Delhi, you generally see that you get the sources which contribute to PM2.5 over a seasonal basis. That is, you get information about summer and then you get about monsoon, post-monsoon or winter. And then you get information about total PM2.5. What you are seeing here is that a very important part of PM2.5, which we call as organic because they have a carbon atom present in that, right? And what we have seen and others also have noted that in Delhi particular and over Ganga plain in general, organics actually contribute from somewhere 2/5 to 3/4 of the total PM2.5. So you can understand from 40% to 75%. And therefore, it's quite important that they are dealt with properly in order to have desired effect of any mitigation strategies. So what you see that we are just showing a plot, which is the top one. What you see, there are different colors, and we are showing them starting from 1st January of 2018 through May of 2018. And you see there are organics, chloride, nitrate, ammonium sulfate, all very important part of organics. And of course, we have also added inorganics here, that is nitrate, ammonium, and sulfate. And then the second panel shows the percentage contribution. The top one is absolute. So you see in January, there are very high numbers going up to 250, 300, 400 microgram per meter cube. And then as the summer sets in, the number drops to probably 100 or 60 or 80 microgram per meter cube. The other important thing, what you notice that you get information here on hourly. You know, every hour you can see how the peaks are varying. So they give you an unprecedented amount of data. And therefore, as I will show you that even the sources can be also obtained at the same time levels, right? As I said before that, earlier studies give you source information on a seasonal basis because only over a season you have that much of data. Here what you're seeing that you are getting data every minute and we have averaged them over hour. So you have a lot more data that is coming through. And on the very bottom panel, what we are showing is the black carbon. And what you see that again in the winter, black carbon, which is a very important part of PM2.5, both from climate, air quality, and health point of view. And you see the values go down from, you know, about 40, 60 microgram per meter cube to about 5 to 10 microgram per meter cube. Now, what we show here is just the speciation of organic aerosols. So the point I was making earlier, that this left top panel shows the different kind of sources, right? And I must walk you through this nomenclature. So you see there are some names here which are not, probably you may not be familiar with. So you have a HOA, like what's called as hydrocarbon-like oxygenated aerosol, organic aerosol. That is mainly that comes from traffic. And then you are seeing SC, that is solid fuel combustion, something which is coming from solid fuel. And then you have OOA, that shows that it is highly oxygenated organic aerosol. That is, it certainly has been after emission, spent a lot of time in atmosphere. So most possibly it must have been emitted elsewhere and then be transported to Delhi's atmosphere. And then below what you see, there are two kind of LVOO1 and LVOOA2. That is, they are different, again, kind of oxidized organic aerosol. So what happens that generally organic aerosols are using this technique, are source apportionment into these things. We are working on these to further map them to physical sources. And I hope that when we are going to complete our lockdown air quality study, which the report is lying with CPCB, we have been successful to even map them to the physical sources. So if you just now focus on this right panel, you find that there is a huge contribution of these green, you know, that is basically, that shows that a good part of organic aerosol is contributed from the sources which are lying outside Delhi. And you see that from winter and then again in summer, there is substantial contribution from solid fuel burning. So that means either wood or possibly coal, etc. And there is a pretty much constant contribution. If you look percentage wise, those gray, you know, in the stack bars, this gray color shows that the contribution from hydrocarbon organic aerosol that mostly we attribute to traffic. What you can further look at here, the left-hand side, we don't have to worry too much. All it shows on the x-axis that what kind of that particular molecule you choose to tag them to a particular source. And that is how you work in that at a molecular level. And that's why it is called, it's basically aerosol, you know, spectroscopic technique. And that works in the field. And on the right-hand side, you are seeing that other strength of this is that you get a diurnal information. So you see three major sources: the traffic, the solid fuel, and highly oxygenated organic aerosol, they are all plotted on a daily time scale. And they are further substantiated with a different color on the opposite y-axis, and that shows that the traffic source is highly corroborating with the traffic part of black carbon, and that is what we write as a EBCTR, because the black carbon we can further source apportion. That is first time we did in Delhi, by the way, into a traffic part, and another is the biofuel, right? And if you look that solid fuel, the diagonal curve, which is a very thin panel, second on the right part, is very well matching with the bio part of the black carbon. So that what shows that there are also independently conducted source apportionment on black carbon, and that is further substantiating it. So there is a pretty high confidence, I would say, in what we are getting about these sources. Now, the second interesting study what we conducted was about sources of volatile organic compounds. So volatile organic compounds are very little known over Delhi, or we know very little about them over Delhi. So what we did that we used 2 PTRMS at 2 sites over Delhi, and we then tried to source apportion them. They are very important because they are precursors to organic aerosols. So you have to remember that you have to devise some strategy where you cut down these co-emitted species, the organic aerosol as well as VOCs, in order to see the desirable effect. And I would only show here very quickly on the right side, you see that I am showing here IIT Delhi and Mano Rachna. And if you look that we have put, there are 2 kind of secondary sources, secondary VOC1 and 2, 2 kind of solid fuel sources, and 2 kind of traffic sources. Now, if you only focus on traffic 1 and 2, and if you look into fractional contribution, top is IIT Delhi, bottom is Mano Rachna. The colors, you will find that IIT Delhi, the gray part, which shows the contribution from traffic 2, which we generally attribute to the heavy duty traffic. That is something which is driven by diesel. And you see that nighttime, how its contribution increases compared to Mano Rachna, where it's by and large flat. So these very, very, detailed differences and specific sources and their diurnality, one can understand by using this variety of very sophisticated online-based instruments which give you a whole wealth of data. I will now switch to the metal source apportionment. So this was another instrument which we deployed in 2018. And 1918, we only used it for PM2.5. And 19, we used it both for PM2.5 and PM10. And broadly speaking, you see a color chart at the right bottom. And what you see that there are 3 major pathways we actually could find out. That one pathway showed that a type of sources actually are operating in the northwest. Another pathway shows that some sources are operating in northeast, and depending on the wind direction, sometime the particulate matter comes from the side of from the Nepal side, or crossing the Nepal border. And that is what I will go further into these plots. These are very detailed plots, but I just like you to focus on the middle one, the middle panel here. What you notice that one can really differentiate between some very, very interesting sources. For example, you have dust, and then you have non-exhaust. What do you mean by non-exhaust? These are tire and brake wear kind of thing, right? Then we can get sulfur rich, which is because of this household coal burning that people use for different kind of energy needs. Then you see you have this copper, cadmium, and lead. That shows that you have some kind of lead related battery operation, and this source we found is coming from Nepal. So these kind of further very detailed information about the industrial sources and distinguishing them from power sources you can get from this type of data. I will just skip this here. It again shows the diurnal because you have that kind of information every hour available. But this is what is the interesting plot. I will spend probably 20 seconds on that. So if you notice that this shows that where these sources are coming from, and what you notice that most of them are actually coming from Northwest, but there are some important differences. For example, on the left bottom, if you see copper, cadmium, and lead, this is what I said, possibly it is coming from some lead battery related factory which is operating on the India-Nepal border or in Nepal, and that when the wind veers, it starts bringing particulate matter from that side, which has these kind of metals. So you see, if you have these type of very highly time resolved metal information and you club them with the wind data, you can really literally pinpoint that this or these sources might be responsible. For example, if you look into sulfur rich, which is the center plot, it shows that, well, in the east, there is a big power plant near UP border, and that is contributing to the measurement site IIT Delhi. This is the fourth study, which again, we tried to link it with a very, very important metric. Now, this metric people have been talking, that is called DTT. So higher the DTT generally, it is shown that it can impact the human lungs in a more adverse fashion. And we wanted to measure that how much DTT, if you have more DTT in particulate matter, there is higher possibility of them entering into a lung and then oxidizing your lung cells. That is the key thing here. What we found that the PM, of course, in Delhi is highly correlated with the DTT, what we could get there from DTT assay. And the DTT itself was roughly 5 to 10 times more than what they have observed in a couple of studies in US. So certainly that it's a pretty toxic, and that has also very strong correlation with organic aerosols. And I've earlier shown that organic aerosol contributes to very high amount of PM here. So this is another interesting thing. That finally what I show here is the last week we got another paper that came out more about linking that groundwater policy shift in Punjab and how it impacts the air quality over Delhi and entire North Indian region. And what we found that certainly one thing was quite known to us, that, well, that crop burning or crop residue burning contributes in a major way to particulate matter, and that goes from 40 to 60% increase in particulate matter over Delhi and over northern India. And that is actually leads to about 50 days of higher exposure of PM, higher than that basically national air quality standard. But interestingly, what we also did a numerical experiment using a very sophisticated model, and this study was done with Terry, University of Leicester, etc. That if, let's say that that shift in the groundwater would not have happened, then what could have been the difference in particulate matter over Delhi? And we did not find that it could have led to any major difference, right? So therefore, that what we see, that crop residue burning impacts Delhi air quality, but that is an outcome of a combination of factors, primarily amount of crop residue and the type of or prevailing meteorology. However, we also found that if that groundwater policy were to shift 10 days more, that it is advanced from 30th June to, let's say, 15th or 10th July, then definitely it will lead to a much aggravated conditions over Delhi and over northern India. So that is what is shown here, that basically in the two hypothetical scenario with the baseline, what kind of changes you see, and those maroon bars show that what changes you will see over different cities actually lying in the Gangetic, Indo-Gangetic plain. So I'll stop it here. Thank you very much. I think I have taken a little more time, but I hope it was worth it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tripathi. Of course, these were dense, but at the same time, I'm sure they are extremely useful. And the thing to now discuss straight away is how to use this in policy making, which is not ad hoc, but it's quite informed. And some of the things that you said, like the oxidative potential, literally for Delhi's air, 5 to 10 times more than that in US, but Delhi and US lungs remain the same. So maybe we will come back to it with Dr. Professor Arvind Kumar in the end. But right now, may I invite you, Dr. Modkare, to talk about your perspective in the last couple of months, and also what you feel these kind of real-time, minute-to-minute data can do in terms of accelerating air quality action. Sir, you're mute.
Hello.
Good morning.
Sorry, Dr. Kumar. We'll let Mr. Modkare talk first, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, good morning, dear panelists. I must congratulate Aarti and entire team for organizing this web seminar on air quality improvement plans. I'm audible? Yeah. So I will right now start with the history. You know, the Maharashtra is the most urbanized and industrialist state in the India, and more than 1 lakh plus industries, 3 lakh plus beds, hospitals, 27 bigger municipal corporations, 260 odd nagar palikas, and urbanized state. And every citizen is looking at the forefront of the Maharashtra, what Maharashtra does to the entire country. Even before the inception of the Water Act, the Maharashtra Water Prevention Control Act was in existence in 1969. So that was a brief history. And you know, the Maharashtra is contributing much to the national income of India. And you know, the National Clean Air Program is launched by Government of India. And in the public domain, we are very vocal and open in the air quality. And 18 non-attainment cities are identified as a NCAP, under NCAP program. And we, along with NEERI, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, and IIT Mumbai, has already, before inception of the National Clean Air Program in 2016, have done the source of pollution study and emission inventory. The preliminary report was submitted way back 2 years back, and now with the final phase of completion of this final action plan. So this 17, 18 cities are also action plan is on the way. As regard to the air quality monitoring state network of Maharashtra, we have nearly 81 manual monitoring stations and 23 continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations in the state of Maharashtra. And all are connected to the national network. And also we have a various program in the state, like development of the robust air quality network, and will be again expanding to another 90 plus continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations and 126 manual monitoring stations. That will be the most by any states in India. And through this air quality monitoring network, we'll try to see what type of pollutants which are there in the atmosphere, and try to develop the action plans of the various cities and industries. Various action plans are already placed in the public domain, but to the on the real-time monitoring network. Ours was the way back in 15 years back, we installed our monitoring network in Bandra in Mumbai and Solapur in Pune, and now expanded to another 23, and all are on real-time basis. When we conducted the studies on a pre and post-COVID installation on real-time monitoring, see, we got before COVID 1/3/2020 to 2/23/2020, and later on in 4 phases lockdown very imperative. When we see the lockdown, there is I will give you directly to the what percentage we have come down. So in all our 22 locations, 24 hours average real pre-COVID and post-COVID, nearly 60%, 55% of PM concentration was reduced. And SOX as NOx is reduced to 30 and 10%. And this is complete reduction in the pollution load due to vehicle and traffic emissions. If you see the entire air quality index, it is entirely on a green network. It is on a complete on a 51 to 100 network scale AQI index, and it is on a satisfactory basis. You know there are some issues in Navi Mumbai because Navi Mumbai is closely associated with one of the biggest industrial estate, that is TTC industrial estate. There may be some incidences of some NOx concentration, but true, we are going ahead with the air quality management plans of various cities, and like now in association with IIT Kanpur just now, in the last week, we signed a MOU with IIT Kanpur for installation of low-cost sensor monitoring at our 15 locations in the state of Maharashtra. It was a MOU signed by MPCB and with the guidance of Professor Tripathi. It will start from the 1st of November 2020 and it will end up on a 31st May 2021. We want to really know what are the hotspots in the monitoring, in networking in and around Mumbai. But when you done the monitoring hotspot with various sensor technologists in last year, there was a co-location test we done, but we could not satisfy the criteria with the analyzer-based technology and sensor-based technology. And to update that knowledge, there was some suggestion from Dr. Sachidananda Tripathi, and we have gone ahead with the MOU. Also, we have signed some MOUs with the US EPA and also with the Japan on this network, and also with the MIT on various networks to be installed. I hope based on this all technological innovation and importance of the real-time monitoring network, we can identify the minute to minute hotspot in the region and develop what are the various contributions of the various pollutant sources and their impact on the health of the people. Already we are in talk with the KEM hospital in Mumbai on this issue, and to see that how best we can give the clean air program and succeed in a national clean air program in the state of Maharashtra. That's all in a very brief from my side, Aarti. I hope I can able to give the overall brief of Maharashtra.
Thanks, Dr. Motkare. I think that was useful to show how the extent of work is happening. And what I picked up was that, you said there is the CAQMS that will be expanded, but also the low-cost network in the coming future. So that's good. Maybe we can come back to some of it as we have the questions and comments later.
Yeah.
But at this point, I mean, you spoke about monitoring and, ramping it up. Maybe that's a good segue, Shloka, for what's your feel has been on the gap that exists on the monitoring network across the country, both in terms of resources and the network itself, and anything else that you want to draw upon in terms of corporate resource and ramping up corporate interest and business interest for air quality action.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Aarti, and thank you for inviting the ICC on this incredible panel. Dr. Tripathi's work always leaves my jaw hanging open because every time he somehow manages to come back with such relevant and sort of interesting and exciting information. And it's such a pleasure to meet Dr. Motkare as well, because we've heard so much about the work you're doing, sir, in Maharashtra, and you're sort of really leading the charge on air quality. And I think it's a wonderful sort of example you're setting for the rest of India. So we're very excited, as I said, to be here. So to answer your questions, Aarti, why is data and monitoring really important to solving the air quality crisis? I think that requires a little bit of context initially. And I think what's crucial to really sort of understand is that we can't solve the problem unless we actually understand the problem. So real-time monitoring results help in actually calculating the air quality index. And that's the way in which we can also issue health advisories as well for formulation of action plans so that they meet the standards. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot about this from Dr. Kumar coming up. But it's important for two reasons. It's important to understand that poor air quality is a combination of many emission sources, as well as environmental factors. And I think this is something that Professor Tripathi was alluding to in his amazing graphs. So the sources of emissions can be vehicular emissions, agricultural residue, waste burning, indoor cooking and heating. We have emissions linked to energy and industry, dust, etc. So it's really complicated. I think the other thing is also the environmental factors. We have meteorological, we have geographical, we have geological, everything from rocks and sands, those also affect the type of air quality. And so that's, I think just sort of wanting to bring out the complexity of the issue is something that I think is really important. I think the second thing is that, while it's a complicated problem just in terms of the sources that lead to air pollution, it's also unique to every region. Every city has to be understood differently. And that adds to sort of that burden of complexity. Again, this is something that Professor Tripathi really brought out in his work. So what are the challenges around data and monitoring? They're essentially two in nature. One is that we don't have the data. And the second is that when we have the data, we don't necessarily know how to use it very well. So on the first point around not having the data, the lack of monitors is a big problem. So according to Urban Emissions, the organization that Sharad runs, India has only 200 reference grade air quality monitors, but we require at least 4,000. For effective monitoring. So that gap is really huge, which is why it's so heartening to see, Dr. Modgire talk about the initiative that he's taking as far as Maharashtra is concerned. We need really more initiatives like this across the country. So monitors are, unevenly placed in urban areas. I think that's definitely something to highlight here, which means that we have a limited understanding also of the rural nature of the problem. I think a good sort of anecdote I can give you around this is Dr. Ashok Kumar Ghosh, who's the chairman of the Bihar SPCB. He said at the World Sustainable Development Summit last year that Bihar had only 3 non-attainment cities, only because they had just 3 reference grade air quality monitors at the time. So, obviously the implication being that if they had more, reference grade monitors, they might be able to actually sort of understand how many non-attainment cities Bihar actually has. Second, we don't have the funds to deploy to make up for this deficit of 4,000 monitors. So each reference grade monitor, of course, is very expensive. They cost between 1.5 to 2 crores, and it's about the same amount for their operation as well as maintenance. So a simple calculation suggests that we need, somewhere close to 10,000 crores just to fill the monitoring gap. And of course, the entire NCAP budget is far less. And that's, this 10,000 crore is just towards monitoring costs. It doesn't even include the other pieces around, what we're hoping to target when it comes to improving our air quality data. So there's an opportunity to really build evidence also as well for the use of low-cost sensors for air quality monitoring. But currently, most PCBs and ULBs aren't very sure if this is a reliable estimate, using low-cost data. So there's a challenge around that as well. The second thing is that I wanted to point out or the challenge when it comes to air quality monitoring is the fact that we don't necessarily use the data very well. So there is a limited use of data right now to create city clean air plans. One of the challenges around this, or one of the challenges that it's created, is that city clean air plans therefore are not very well prioritized. The Center for Energy and Environment and Water, CEW, did an analysis on this, and their analysis actually laid out that city clean air plans look the same across 15 states. They are essentially just a laundry list of activities without accounting for the source of the problem. Only 25 city clean air plans actually contain some sort of source information. So that's obviously a big challenge. I think this lack of understanding, also leads to a suboptimal usage of government funds. So you end up spending it on very low return activities often. Activities that will affect maybe things like the dust factor, but they won't address the myriad of other factors that Professor Tripathi pointed out today, despite spending so much funding. So for instance, according to Carbon Copy's NCAP tracker, cities were allocated a majority of their NCAP funds in 2019, and they spent a majority of that allocation towards interventions such as street sweepers, water sprinklers, green paving. That's obviously produced limited returns in terms of improved air quality. I think the more interesting question, Aarti, and you and I were speaking about that earlier this week, is how is COVID, and the lockdown affected air quality in India? And that's a really interesting set of answers here. Of course, I think everyone knows this. We all widely acknowledge that the air quality in our cities has temporarily improved during the lockdown, and we've all seen and experienced clearer skies and fresher air. I think this experience has really shown us what we deserve. I would not in any way want to make light of the costs that we've had to pay for it. But I do want to say that it has shown us that it is possible to get there, and to get there in our lifetime. So we can see that world now. And the question is, how do we hold on to these clearer skies? I think the second thing that's important to point out is that the health impacts of poor air quality are worse than that of COVID. A study that has come out recently in China has estimated that the avoided deaths due to improved air quality in terms of both NO2 and PM2.5 in Chinese cities during the lockdown there have exceeded the total number of deaths in China due to COVID-19. This was as of May 4, 2020. Of course, these are preliminary results, but it's an interesting study, and it throws up a whole host of questions regardless. Furthermore, early research has also suggested that pollution exacerbates the COVID crisis. Again, it's an early study, but in the United States, research has found that sort of an increase in 1 unit of pollution in PM2.5 is associated with an 8% increase in COVID-19 death rates. So some really sort of tremendous numbers there that are coming out. I think it's, again, as I want to say, it's really early to provide a direct correlation between higher air pollution levels and an incidence of COVID-19. And higher air pollution levels might also increase the risk of contracting COVID-19, as the particulate matter has the potential to act as carriers for contagion, leading to sort of a rapid spread over large areas. But again, this is early research. I think also, moreover, exposure in particulate matter over an elongated period of time has shown to sort of damage the lining of lungs and has shown to also weaken the body's ability to fend off respiratory infections, which could also lead to potentially greater number of COVID deaths. So I say all of this, and I brought this context out around COVID because I wanted to say that we're really at an inflection point. COVID has exposed our weaknesses, our very unsustainable practices, and what we do now is going to be in place for many, many years going forward. So for instance, while, one of the largest shifts I would really say, which, we're all facing right now, is that, we might be seeing a sort of shift to work from home, even post-COVID. And that could result in reduced congestion and vehicular emissions. However, the automobile sector is also booming. And this is because, there's obviously a heightened fear around using public transport. So we could either create better infrastructure for cycling and walking, or we could see a huge sort of surge in private vehicles usage. So again, it's an inflection point. And as a result, the role of the government at this time, I think, is really critical. We've seen an EIA notification post-COVID, which has really diluted regulatory measures that impose a lot of costs on polluters. And they've cited the need for sort of, urgent economic recovery and the need for ease of doing business. And that's a trend that I think is obviously a cause for concern. So it brings me back to your final question. What can the donor community do? What can the business community do? What can philanthropists and philanthropies do? I think it's very evident that Indian and international donors can come together at this critical juncture to fight against both these challenges to society, COVID, of course, and air pollution. I think what we really are trying to push ahead on with a very strong emphasis on is the idea of a green recovery. this community can really influence governments. They can use the work that they are doing in their sectors and their businesses to shift towards sort of greener, more sustainable practices. Jawaharlal Nehru once said this, that, crisis and deadlocks, when they occur, they at least have this advantage that they force us to think. And I think we have to really sit down and question how we drive India's development forward. As a country, are we prepared to make structural shifts in how we recover, or are we going to lock ourselves into a very risky development pathway? And I think there's a very strong belief amongst the core constituency in India. I'm sure many people on this call today, that the only way to truly recover from this crisis in the mid to long term is to overlay sustainable, affordable, inclusive, and just reforms onto any sort of stimulus package that we are producing. Others obviously feel that the cost of lives and livelihoods means that anything goes if it means restarting economic activity. But I think we at the ICC and many of us in the sector really sort of think that India should choose to, whatever pathway India chooses, it has to go hand in hand with job creation and a strong and swift economic recovery. So I think on that point, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that the government has made a significant commitment to air quality with the NCAP. And we're seeing a really positive shift on the AQ piece as far as government, dedication and commitment is towards this cause. They have increased air quality funding by an order of magnitude from 300 crores to 4,400 crores. They have focused on it's fairly evident that they're focusing on urban areas, and that's a good place to start. And so again, the donor community can really support the government by increasing the efficacy of their spending, by solving for sort of foundational data and monitoring challenges, like the ones that I've just mentioned, as well as making really catalytic investments in this space. So they can build evidence on the usage and reliability of low-cost air quality sensors. They can build the capacity as well as develop tools and frameworks to help develop city clean air plans. And right now, the ICC is leading thinking on an air quality monitoring network of low-cost sensors in Mumbai. It's a BMC-driven project. We're building a consortium of donors, which potentially include the Tata Trust, the CIF, which is the Children's Investment Foundation Fund, Bloomberg, etc., as well as a consortium of other Indian domestic funders. And we're really seeing if we can sort of achieve some immediate goals. We would love to work with the MPCB. So Dr. Motkare, please do consider us as well. We really sort of see immense value in the project that you and Professor Tripathi are working on. And again, there's such a huge potential here for projects like this to act as a proof of concept, to solve for the data and monitoring challenges across the nation. So, we've gone through a difficult period, Aarti. Of course, there's a long pathway ahead of us. But there are some signs of, encouragement, especially, as I said, the seriousness that the government is giving sort of the issue around the lack of data and monitoring. So back to you.
Thank you very much, Shloka, for taking us through the whole landscape on air quality management in India. But I think what you said in the end will be very appealing to some of us. And maybe I will bring that up in discussions. You're right, there are a lot of sensor-based activities that are going on, and joining them up in a very constructive way will have that effect where the sum is more than the parts. And I think that is what the intention should be here. Thanks for just, giving all the roundup on how you're also trying to bring the Indian corporates on board. You spoke about people's health. I think we've all felt it through the lockdown, and never before, at least our generation has felt that much vulnerable to the outside world, and so willing to make change. I mean, we did one survey about 2 months back, just during the lockdown, where we went around and asked people in top 10 most populated cities of the country on how they feel about what's happening in the outside world, what they are willing to do. And it was really quite stark that many people felt they were willing to stay at home. They were willing to not take their car out for small distances. They were willing to make a little sacrifice if that kept their immediate surroundings clean. And I think that speaks a lot to just the realization that people have had that whatever has happened even through a virus, is a result of just human intransigence and the fact that, we have played with nature a little more than what is needed. Anyway, I think just the discussion on how the social and behavior patterns could change for the long term could be a separate study in and of itself, and might reveal a lot about how people are able to step up and create that demand really for air pollution, which we always have felt is missing, and which is why you don't have a very strong link between how policymakers need to act, because the public does not demand. At this moment, sir, can I ask you, Dr. Arvind Kumar, sir, could you please talk now about what's been your experience? How have you seen the last couple of months, especially in terms of public health and air quality? And if you have any scientific research to draw upon in terms of where you see the links between repeated long-term exposure to bad air and to other pandemics, which might not have direct relation to climate change, but are certainly definitely linked. Abhishek, are you on the call? Can you check if Dr. Arvind Kumar is around?
Yes, Aarti, just give me a second.
Okay, sir. Okay,
yeah,
Abhishek.
Aarti, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you. Can you switch on your video also? Yeah, actually, there's some problem in the office right now, and
it's working, sir.
Yeah, it will go off after a few minutes. I've tried connecting with my mobile, somebody else's mobile, and my office Wi-Fi, but it goes off in between. Anyway,
I'm sorry, but you can.
Right
you are audible. You can turn the video off whenever you want.
Yeah. Can you just repeat the question, Aarti, that you?
So broadly, broadly two things. What's been your experience in the last 3 or 4 months, and linking how bad air exacerbates the problem, with respect to when other situations on health happen, and generally your take on how, the country has to recover, and therefore the need for keeping just these things like air quality also in front and center of policy making, and linking this to climate action rather than just keeping it as some air quality issue on the side, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel, and heartiest congratulations to Dr. Tripathi. It's always amazing to see those wonderful, colorful slides and the volume of data which they represent, and the amount of thinking and their practical relevance. All the 4 studies I just had gone through quickly in the email which you had sent to me. So as far as oxidative potential of PM 2.5, the heavy metals, the VOCs, and the 4th study, they're all very, very relevant. And out of these, I would pick up 2 for their very, very practical relevance. One is about the oxidative potential. So up till now, we only had been talking about the PM 2.5 in absolute numbers, that, okay, Delhi has so much of PM 2.5, that city has so much of, but what is more important is what is loaded on the PM 2.5 and how much damage inside it is doing. So now the oxidative potential of the PM 2.5, which basically means once it reaches the lung, there are oxidative chemicals and there are antioxidants. Now this causes oxidation, it releases free oxygen radicals there, which ultimately cause damage to the lung parenchyma and other tissues. So truly, this oxidative potential actually reflects the damage causing potential of that PM 2.5. And you actually may have a situation where a city may have slightly lower levels of PM 2.5, but with more toxic quality of PM 2.5, which in terms of health damage will be far more damaging than another city which may have a higher level, but with lower oxidative potential and therefore lower. So Dr. Tripathi, your study is truly amazing. It has a huge amount of practical relevance. And in the last 2-3 years, there has been a lot of data. There are studies from Canada, Ontario, which have come out, which also have alluded to the same point. So I think this is very, very relevant. And I strongly feel that more work with this kind of online data needs to be done in this area to really know the levels, their toxicity, their damage causing potential, and also the sources, because what is the point of knowing if you are not able to rectify it? So if we know the sources real time, and we also know the variation in the different sources in different months of the year, as he has so elegantly shown in his slides. So huge amount of practical relevance of these studies in terms of conversion into action. The second was about the heavy metals. I would like to make a mention of a similar study we did in around Diwali 2018. Shweta was involved. She was the one who supplied us all the material, where we had looked at the levels of various heavy metals. And we in this study had found very, very high levels of not just manganese, nickel, lead, silicon, and barium. Now, why barium? Because this study was done just post Diwali, and you know, barium is used in large amounts in the crackers, and we study this sample was taken from South Delhi. So this is also a very, very study of a lot of practical relevance. So huge amount of practical relevance of these studies. Second aspect I want to touch is about the COVID, air pollution, and last couple of months. So definitely last couple of months have seen improvement in the condition of asthmatic COPD patients all across the country. We've never had more blue skies and more fresh air, and it has definitely reflected in the improvement in the condition of various patients. Unfortunately, this is going to be temporary, and we are seeing in Delhi that as the number of vehicles is increasing and as the activity is increasing, we are going to have those levels. I would refer to what Ms. Shloka said, that this actually has shown us the way that if we decide to do it and get it, it is doable, it is achievable. Although all of us used to think, oh, what can be done about the air quality? Probably it can never be improved. But now we have seen, of course, there was a heavy price which was paid, but I'm sure if we take a cue from this, a time will come where we can have cleaner skies, cleaner air and bluer skies, and not paying that price, but correcting the ways in which we live. Air pollution and COVID has been an area of concern, and starting from study from China to going to study from Italy, from Europe, from Harvard, and there are over 12 such studies now available in the literature, which have all very clearly linked. And most notable I would refer to is the Italian study, where they did a countrywide heat mapping of the PM 2.5 data and of the COVID data on the other side. And the COVID data map was the exact replica of the PM 2.5 map, which basically means that areas with higher levels of 2.5 had higher incidence. So there are two things which happen. There is a higher incidence of COVID in pollution affected communities, and these people, when they get COVID, they tend to have more often the complicated, serious variety, and therefore higher mortality. And this was elegantly demonstrated in the Harvard study, where, as Ms. Shloka said, every 1 microgram per meter cube increase in 2.5 resulted in 8% increase in mortality. And the reasons are not far to seek, because PM 2.5 acts as a carrier for these virus particles. And if you have already affected lungs, affected blood vessels, when you get 2.5 COVID, you will have higher mortality. So COVID actually has exposed the fault lines that this problem is going to affect us badly. The weakest community, the most affected communities are the one who will actually, unfortunately, bear the brunt of the attack. And this is being very starkly being shown in US, where, you know, the African American community is far, far, far more affected in terms of numbers and mortality as compared to the European American community. It was also shown very starkly in data from NHS England, where the first 10 healthcare workers' deaths were all in the immigrant population. And till date, majority of the healthcare worker deaths have been in the immigrant population, people from Asia and Africa. So this is a very, very clear-cut link, and it has a lot of relevance for future, because if the problem of air pollution, problem of climate change continues as it is, let me warn you that this is not the last of pandemics that we are seeing. There are more viruses lurking in the background, and with increase in the animal-human interaction, there could be more, and we need to work very, very strongly on this area. Last thing, Aarti, I want to touch upon is the role of health effects and NCAP, and I take this opportunity because Dr. Tripathi is also here. We are all worried about the health impacts of NCAP, but unfortunately, improvement in health metrics being taken as the key determinants and key drivers of all pollution-related decision-making is an angle which is sadly missing from the NCAP. And I would take this opportunity to maybe request Dr. Tripathi and all of you that somewhere we need to bring this health in the center, in the main focus of all our activity. In fact, we've already started making a humble effort towards that. We had organized a meeting for some of the leading parliamentarians where we brought up the fact that the US Clean Air Act, the opening word is actually health effects or health impacts of air pollution, where our Clean Air Act of 1981 does not mention health at all, and health does not find a central focus in the NCAP also. So all of us need to collectively work on our policy makers to bring health in the center of this focus. It's only when health comes in the center, in the focus area of the activities, that I think people will understand the importance of this topic far more than they do today, where many times people just consider it as a chemical problem or an environmental problem, which they feel is not impacting them directly, which is actually sadly not the case. Once they know that it is actually impacting their health, their children's health, their future generations, I'm sure they would have far more involvement with this issue. And I very strongly believe that this issue will find a correction only when it becomes a national movement in which everybody in the country is involved and participating. As long as it remains confined to few informed individuals like in this webinar, it will remain a topic of discussion, and these kind of webinars will not find a connect with the person on the ground. But if they know that it's their health, their children's health, and if they love their children, they've got to do something about it. I'm sure it will become a people's movement which will bring about the change that all of us so badly desire. Aarti.
Thanks very much, sir. You always hit the nail on the head and you do it repeatedly, but I think your point, the last one, was quite significant as well as sobering. I don't want, actually, Professor Tripathi, is up to you if you really want to respond to it directly, because I thought, you know, it just places everything in the right context, that we are talking about NCAP, we are talking about reducing targets in 5 years. Literally, the lockdown has bettered the NCAP target already in 70 days' time. And if that be the situation, how difficult it is for our ministry and the decision-making authorities to actually place public health at the center and take some decisions based on cost benefit, including public health, and not just the cost of doing the monitoring, the cost of buying automated sweepers, and looking at these kind of, you know, like the practical costs of things. So do you want to respond briefly to that?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kumar, for connecting it with the central problem, right? Health. Just to let you and everyone know that I was looking into how this National Air Quality Standard has come into place. And I looked into actually extensively in last 1 month, as you rightly said, US, France, China, Brazil, and not everywhere actually, which should be the case, that health has been under the premise on which you build this entire standard thing, right? You can look into that, for example, Brazil or even China does say that they have taken health as a very important input while building the parameter standard, but they have not. The reason being, as you know very well, that unless you have your own extensive epidemiological study conducted on your own people, people do not put that into while making the standard. You cannot rely on other data to make a standard, no matter how reputed or accepted that study is, right? And I see there is a point, of course, that can be debatable. But what I believe that it is very much recognized that health is the most important thing related to air quality. But unless we have our own data, and I believe there are concerted effort being done, and that's why I let you know that some of these study, I acknowledge DBT, and I was not principal investigator of this project, which is called Daphne, which is led by an epidemiologist, and a good part of the outcome has come out from the project, which is actually Delhi air pollution health and effects. That is why DBT has funded this large India-UK project. I believe that MOHFW is also looking into that. In fact, I can tell you that they just commissioned a study to look into the health benefits of people, or mainly rural women, who are connected with Ujjwala. So of course, these are more related to what benefit a particular scheme has brought into, but there are at least 2 or 3 major groups who are working to clearly find a link between PM and the health impact, which is applicable to Indian population. I think unless we have that, we cannot conclusively link that to a standard. I think probably I have responded to Dr. Kumar on this.
Amply clear, Professor. Thanks very much. That makes sense. I'm sorry that the clock has been ticking. We are 10 minutes past 12. We have to wrap up at 12:30. There is a slew of questions on the side. I will try to read them, and maybe I request short answers to each one. But let's go with the questions that are there. Dr. Modghare, there is a question from Hindustan Times which says, could you elaborate the 15 locations where the low-cost monitors will be located? And are they the same locations where the continuous monitors have been set up?
Yeah. First of all, it's an advance happy birthday to Dr. Tripathi. Tomorrow is his birthday. Sir, happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
Birthday, sir.
So nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Best wishes.
It's tomorrow, but
Thank
it's a good opportunity to wish Dr. Tripathi.
Dr. Modghare, if you had informed earlier, we could have arranged for a cake also. So we could have a digital cake cutting also.
That Aarti can do, Aarti.
Thank you.
Sir, regarding the question right now, see, we have already conducted this type of study in the last year along with the various manufacturers. Now, with the IIT Kanpur and under the able leadership of Dr. Tripathi, we will be installing this low-cost sensor at our locations in Mumbai and Navi Mumbai, at wherever all our analyzer-based continuous ambient air quality monitoring is there. So this is right from, you start from South Bombay, like Kulaba, Worli, Sion, Ghatkopar, then Vileparle, Chembur. Like that, there are 11 locations in Bombay, then 3 locations in Navi Mumbai, then Vasai Virar, Thana, like that. There are 15 locations. And earlier, we have done this monitoring with the core manufacturer like Bosch, Climo, AirSense, Ozium. And this was also done in our existing CAQMS at Sion and Mahape. So I think, Aarti, I have answered your question. Yeah. Okay.
Sure. There are a few questions. I will keep going. Maybe again, Dr. Modhare, you want to
Yeah.
pick this up. This says there are several monitors on the MPCB website which were not functioning from the lockdown period to now, including those in Borivali, Worli, Nerul, and Dombivali.
Yeah.
Any reason?
Yeah. Borivali, there was a power failure because there was complete lockdown. This is a nodal center for us, Borivali, because it is inside the national park. So there was an issue on a power internet, mainly not a power failure. There was internet issue. But when we started the background, there may be not be a display on the working, but internal data was working. Regarding Nerul, yes, there was a issue of the power failure that now we rectify. But all the data are there in the battery of battery system, but it is not in the display mode. But you can get the data.
Sure, thanks. I do realize that these questions are very city specific and relevant to a smaller discussion, but I think it's important to just bring these in also as we talk about the bigger issues. Professor Tripathi, there is a question from Carbon Copy. The question is, how do you think the findings from your source apportionment can be used to improve city action plans? And more generally, if you think, what's the kind of engagement from state and local bodies on the national knowledge network?
Well, so first thing first, that if you see that these findings are pointing to two things, that as probably other panelists, Shloka also pointed out, that you have to bring some, major reforms. For example, moving away from this solid fuel and getting more people connected to, like LPG. That's one thing which repeatedly has been shown that it can brought down. So it is not specific to any city. In fact, you go from Punjab all the way to Bengal or Assam, if you can make literally most of the households connected to LPG, you would see significant drop in PM 2.5. Likewise, there are two other reforms. For example, moving to e-vehicle or better enforcement of Bharat 6. These two are going to cut down majorly, again, PM 2.5 and its constituents. In fact, in lockdown, the report we have submitted to CPCB clearly shows that exactly how much traffic has come down, and that correlates beautifully with the mobility data. The third related major reform is that if industries move to cleaner fuels, now industries also contribute, which generally are not recognized. These three are very formal reforms which are not state or city specific. They are very much applicable to, I would say, entire Gangetic Plain and good part of India. Then you actually need to hasten the source apportionment studies, right? And definitely many boards are doing, and there comes the role of knowledge network, which is a very formalized network established by MOEFCC. IIT Kanpur is the national nodal institution for that. What they are doing, so in one line I will tell you that that already 18 states were brought into its ambit, with most of them having either IIT or any other institute of repute. Now what the ministry has decided, which is very heartening, to expand this network by bringing more institutions, more and more, that is probably every NIT or every other institute which has either an established group which is looking into air quality or even environmental engineering. The idea here is that, and I think it's very much, underway. We should hear about it very, very soon. The two major goals behind these expansions are, one is that each of these institutes would be working directly with the city administrators in implementation or effective implementation of city plan related to air quality. And two, they will also act as audit persons for looking into the efficacy or overall, how it has been implemented for other cities. So I believe that knowledge network can play a bigger role in coming days. And that's where we are heading to.
I will like to add this point, Aarti. as per the ministry guidelines, there is a 3-tier committee. One is local level, which is under the chairmanship of a municipal commissioner. Second committee oversee will be under the secretary ministry of the state ministry. And third one is the oversee will be under the chief secretary. So these 3-tier committees are already formed as per the ministry guidelines, and they are supervising the action plan. Okay.
Thanks. Very useful to get all that input, because it's that update I don't think we've had yet, that there is so much progress happening under the NCAP and the implementation, especially at the city level. So that's useful. Sorry, I've kind of lost track of the sequence of questions, and I apologize to those who have written. I will pick all of them, but there are related questions that I see in the chat, and one question is again on NCAP only. And Dr. Modkare, maybe you want to pick up that there was supposed to be allocation of 4,000 crores under the NCAP by this April. Did MPCB receive that amount, or there is change or shift on utilization?
So this is last month or around 11th of June, the Secretary Ministry of Environment has taken the meeting with all the state boards, and there was a fund allocation from the 15th Finance Commission, and various states have allocated, and Maharashtra has allocated some 400 odd crores. But this is all now under the 15th Finance Commission. We have submitted our utilization certificate of the last funds we have received. Now, minute to minute details they have asked from each board, and we are in process of submitting, and it is up to the call of the Government of India to allocate the fund. But implementation is in progress.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, thanks. I'm just, picking up questions because there were some that I missed initially. There is a general question. Sorry, I don't know who it is. It just says Galaxy Note. Also, again to you, Dr. Modkare, if there are any suggestions or plans to control pollution post the COVID era. Sorry, this is Anuja from Maharashtra Times. As things are getting better, so how, as you emerge from the lockdown, how will the situation be?
We have formulated our, Anuja, we have formulated our policy for the use of alternative cleaner fuel like PNG and natural gas. Then feasibility of common air treatment. Then we are gone with the issue directions to the for the commuter choice program. This is the first time in India, in Mumbai, in this Lower Parel circle, we have gathered information of various bigger private conglomerate, and we are issue a precautionary measures note. So why don't you switch to the common commuter choice program? And we are working on that. In Mumbai, in Pune and Nagpur, we are going ahead with a electric vehicle, and board will be sponsoring those projects. Then we are going with a strengthening of monitoring network, R&D based technological network. Then we are thinking on a very innovative ideas, which is in the pipeline, like carbon footprints for the Maharashtra, then carbon neutral cities and towns. These are very innovative idea. Then green energy intervention in the state of Maharashtra. These are in a very preliminary, but we are on a track on this issue. So these are, Anuja, I can say as you know, the Maharashtra shows the way to everyone. So we are front leaders in those pollution control technology, and hope we can find this item gets succeed. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right about Maharashtra leading the way, which is, I think I'm firing all the questions to you. I will go with one more to you, Dr. Modkare, which is a question by Hindustan newspaper. And the question is that Maharashtra Pollution Control Board was to set up 40 air quality monitoring stations. I think, sir, this is the one that you also spoke about. So the question that is being asked is that, is it going to take more time, or when is it supposed to come up? Kindly, could you say?
Yeah, it was the first time when the last to last year, National Clean Air Program was announced. But prior to that, we have taken the board sanction. And last year, we have floated the tender. But out of 4 parties which were participated in the tender, only one was qualified technically. As per the guidelines, we have to retender, and we have completed all the retender formalities, and it will be tender will be out within at any time, at any moment of time. So all nearly in the first page, 47 CAQMS monitoring network will be now tender will be published at any time. Anytime it is ready, only waiting for the tender to publish. So this 47 and another will be the second lot.
Got it. This is going to be prompt action. There is a question from Megha Bahari, and the question is to the panel, which is generally about India's economic recovery and the fact that it will resume irrespective. Is anything being done that you can speak of in terms of addressing emissions from even major contributors like stubble, so that, you know, it's a matter of time before we get back to high pollution levels, and how do we control that? Would you, Dr. Kumar, Professor Tripathi, Shloka, would you like to comment on this briefly? Anybody can pick up, but if it's stubble, then is there anything that you know, Professor Tripathi, on is any effort being done at the state levels?
Well, I mean, there are efforts, and that's why there was a, kind of real interest to look into the lockdown sources, and that has been looked into very, very, seriously. I would probably just say that because what are the individual plans of states, I'm not privy of, but definitely as far as the central government is concerned, there are major efforts going on to learn from the sources information. That's why it was given to them during lockdown, and try to use them for, as was mentioned, the green recovery. That's very much, that's where we are heading to.
Sorry, Professor, we lost you for 10 seconds. Can you please repeat the last sentence?
Yeah, I was telling that that's why that lockdown source information from Delhi was taken, and that interest was shown by CPCB, and even highest office of this country was involved in looking into the data. And I believe that certainly follow-up actions must be being taken. I am quite sure that Ujjwala Yojana would be further amplified. That's for certain.
Right. Right. And I hope, if we can prevent the peak in the Delhi winter, that will be a huge victory as well. We've had it now a couple of years. Last year was slightly less than 2016 and 17. So even preventing that winter peak with stubble burning can be one of the things to focus on. I will keep moving. We have less time. Dr. Kumar, a request to you, sir, if you can please share the study that you referred to on COVID and 2.5 mapping. You can do that later. Thanks in advance.
Yeah,
right.
Aarti, we have all these studies, and I'll be happy to share these slides with you.
Thanks, sir. There is also a question.
I'll email them to you. There are 7-8 major studies, so we'll share it with them.
Sir, maybe you want to speak a little to this. I know you refer to it, but there is again a specific question on what role can health advisories play in reducing pollution exposure for vulnerable groups, and how can these build greater accountability for our policy making?
So health advisories are very important, but before you can reach the stage of issuing evidence and data-based health advisory, the first step is to have real-time data available. And that's why the work of Dr. Tripathi assumes so much of importance, that if you have these real-time data available as to how various toxins are moving and what are the sources from where they are coming. So one, based on the fact that the levels are high, you would advise people to do certain activities or not do certain activities, or even close down schools, as we often face in Delhi during winter time. Secondly, once you know what are the major sources from where these contributions are coming, you would be able to do source directed corrective measures. As you showed that if it's coming mainly from your vehicles, then you probably need to act on the vehicle or the fuel or the tires and so on and so forth. So first step, I think, is to have good quality real-time data available. And once that data is available, I think the government and the health department and the health personnel can be brought into picture to convey this to people in simple, easy to understand, maybe very photo-based kind of messages, simple messages which could be reached out to people through WhatsApp, through print media, through electronic media, so that people are aware of what's happening, from where it is coming, and people can take corrective measures also. So I think there is a huge role for information, data-based health advisories on a real-time basis. Aarti.
Thanks, sir. There is also a request from Mr. T.P. Ashwin of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and there is asking if there is any research paper on data of how many people are dying or affected due to air pollution in India. So I think this is on your and Professor Tripathi conversation on including health as an important element, and therefore if there is Indian data. So if there is anything available, then we can share that with you, Mr. Ashwin. Thanks for the comment.
Whatever, I mean, as I agree with Dr. Tripathi that hardcore data available from our country isn't that much. There is not much of robust data available, but whatever little is available, I'll be happy to share it with you and you can pass it on.
Thanks, sir. Shloka, there is a question from Nivedita on electric vehicles, and she's asking how much emphasis has been on electric run cars as a mitigation measure, and what do you think, in your sense, the electric vehicle sector will look in the next 5 years?
It's a great question. So the Indian government, of course, has set very ambitious targets to accelerate the adoption of EVs. I think by 2023, they've stated that they want all three-wheelers to run on batteries. By 2025, the rule is going to be applicable to most two-wheelers. So essentially, according to market reports, we're seeing, more than a 22% sort of, compounded annual growth rate year on year for the EV market in the near future. I think the reason being is that the cost of sort of various components that go into manufacturing an an EV is continuously reducing as a result of, economies of scale. So for instance, like battery prices are expected to fall by more than 30% by 2025, which will also make EVs a lot more affordable. But I think, what is really interesting when it comes to the Indian market is the fact that we're going to see sort of the future really depend on the electric two-wheeler growth. It's very affordable, and I sense that, from a passenger perspective, people do find that method of transport, quite safe as well, especially like post-COVID. I think the challenge that we face in the electric vehicle market in India is that there is already a private market that we're trying to replace. So it's not a new market that we're trying to grow, so to speak. And as a result, we're going to have to really think very deeply around how we make electric an overall better choice than non-electric for the average Indian consumer. I think also, as mentioning COVID, I think the EV industry is going to definitely face some impact as a result of that, which is, consumers are likely to think more about how they can breathe easy and remain healthy if, society moves towards greater e-mobility. And given the right impetus by the government and industry, the EV industry can actually sort of spring back faster than the ailing IC vehicle segment. I think finally, a pertinent factor that may work also in the favor of electric vehicles post-COVID is something that I sort of mentioned earlier when I spoke, was about the fact that we're going to see a lot of people switching over from crowded mass transport to sensibly sort of priced electric electric two-wheelers with the almost same cost of commuting as public transport. And also on the air pollution side, of course, the majority of vehicular pollution comes from two-wheelers. So electric two-wheelers are an important focus. And just in terms of, other sort of trends that we're seeing on the EV side, we are seeing e-carts becoming a convenient and cost-effective means of shorter distance logistics. We're also seeing e-taxi fleets beginning to make money due to lower operating costs. And that might also contribute to the growth of the EV industry.
Thanks, Shloka. And may I add a little, and I know we are on top of the hour, I will take just 30 seconds and we can wrap up. So we also did a little back of the envelope calculation on how many buses India has, and these are state transport and public buses. And apparently there are about maximum 40,000 buses. And even if you don't consider social distancing, then the number of buses that are needed to adequately fit the people who are using public transport is at least 250,000 to 300,000. And if you took social distancing also as an element for it, and we used the BEST bus calculation on how many people in a particular bus, then literally, India has 30,000 buses and we need 600,000 buses. And it's an expensive proposition to buy buses. So I'm sure there is more that needs to be done on rationalization of routes, making sure that, there is efficiency in bus management and fleet management. But even that thing of, there is a segment of population which will not be able to buy a car no matter what. So for that, you have to make sure that, if state governments are buying new buses, they better make them electric. And this is a very simple, logical thing, but I thought I will just highlight it once. I have tried to cover all the questions. I think I've only missed one question, and I know journalists love your responses, Dr. Modkare, so I will allow that question again. That the question is on when will source apportionment studies be made available, the Maharashtra studies be made available in the public domain? Are they constrained? Is there any constraint within respective city boundaries, or these source apportionment studies can include large airsheds? Maybe you can answer briefly and just say when they will be available if time is short. Yeah.
Like 10 city studies, already short-term action plan is already available. Later on, 7 cities we have issued in the 2018, and 1 Thana we have just issued recently. But 10 cities, full work will be available within a couple of 2-3 months. I had a meeting with the director, Niri, our chairman has a meeting 2 weeks back, and hope some monitoring is to be done. And within 6 months, this complete study of first 10 cities will be available. And what are the fact finding, what is the contribution will be, it will be in the public domain. It will be submitted to Government of India. So I think Maharashtra is always vocal, and highest number of monitoring stations. That's what highest number of the non-attainment cities. So hope it will be available.
Thank you for taking all these questions. Thanks very much. At this point, we are 5 minutes on top. My apologies for being extending this panel, but I will leave 30 seconds for any last final comments from our very esteemed panel, and then I will wrap up.
I must congratulate all Aarti and all my fellow panelists, renowned panelists, for this overwhelming suggestions and responses they have given. And I hope Aarti and all my journalist friends who loves to be in air pollution like crusaders also hope to directly interact with the State Pollution Control Board and look forward for interaction.
Yes.
And whatever the ideas are there, we'll put forward before the common public for the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on that note, yes,
Aarti,
sir. Yes, sir.
Can I just make an announcement?
Please.
Since we had a lot of discussion about air pollution COVID issue, I would just like to share that this Saturday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., we have an international webinar on emerging global research on air pollution and COVID, where we have 3 top pulmonologists of the country discussing the issue of air pollution and COVID. And I'll be happy to share the link with you, and you could share, since we have a lot of journalists, I'm sure a lot of them may be interested, and I take this opportunity to invite all of them. Saturday, 6 to 7:30, I'll share the Zoom link with you. Thank you, Aarti, and thanks to Dr. Tripathi for this wonderful research, and Dr. Motgare and Ms. Shloka for their illuminating talks. I enjoyed being on this panel. Thank you for organizing this panel. Thank you so much.
Sir, many, many thanks.
Likewise. Thank you all. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Professor
it.
Tripathi. Thank you, Shloka. I will wrap up this call now. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.